The Postal Service is a joke because they're handing out packages for Amazon and other internet companies, and every time they bring a package, they lose money on it. If they don't raise the price of the service they give, which is a tremendous service, and they do a great job, and the postal workers are fantastic, but this thing's losing billions of dollars. It has for years.
And they did something to the public postal service that no other government agency and no other private company has ever had to do. And it's just too onerous. They forced the post office to pay 75 years into the future, and within a 10-year period, 75 years into the future, retiree health benefits. If you took out that pre-funding mandate, the post office actually did quite well. The post office is not set up as a business. It's not set up to pack billions of dollars in the bank and enrich shareholders or CEOs. It's set up to serve the people of the country, and it was doing that well, even with the challenges.
The Postal Service has been operating in an unsustainable manner for a long time. When President Trump named Postmaster DeJoy in 2020, the Postal Service was then in need of reform. In response, Postmaster DeJoy launched the 10-year Delivering for America plan. He has stated repeatedly that the Postal Service, quote, must operate in many ways like a private business. Of course, some private businesses succeed and others go bankrupt. Congress passed the bipartisan Postal Service Reform Act in 2022. This helped the Postal Service avoid imminent financial collapse and gave Postmaster DeJoy runway to implement his plan for success. The law helped the Postal Service progress towards graduating from the GAO's high-risk list, which ranks government operations most vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse, and getting off that list is indeed hard to accomplish. Despite all these bipartisan efforts, it seems that Postmaster DeJoy has failed to use all of this new discretion and resources effectively. His changes to the delivery network have resulted in a disastrous decline in on-time delivery in many regions of the country. 3 years into his plan, however, the financial condition of the Postal Service is astoundingly bad and much worse than all of his initial projections. Postmaster DeJoy projected in his original Delivering for America plan that the Postal Service would reach break-even by 2023 or 2024. Instead, the Postal Service's net loss of $950 million from operations in FY 2022 increased to a whopping $9.5 billion net loss in FY 2024. That's a 900% increase in the Postal Service's losses in a 2-year time span. Under Mr. DeJoy's leadership, Americans are paying higher prices for worse service. More than 3 years into Delivering for America's implementation, with more than 150 ongoing projects initiated to meet the Postmaster's goals, customers are still seeing a decline in mail delivery service, and they're paying higher costs for it. The Postmaster General's plan isn't working, but Mr. DeJoy continues to drive everything in the wrong direction. Mr. DeJoy's leadership of the Postal Service is an alarming example of what we may see coming in the next term, sticking to the mega playbook of treating essential government functions with cavalier recklessness and ignoring the differences between a private sector company and a public good.
Jamie Raskin opened up a recent oversight committee hearing about the U.S. Postal Service and its recent failures with a strong rebuke of multimillionaire Trump mega donor and Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. He's been slowly dismantling the system from within, opening up opportunities for his allies in the private sector to snatch up lost business for themselves. Texas progressive Greg Casar picked up where Raskin left off later in the hearing.
In August of last year, I sent you a letter signed by 76 members of Congress asking for the Postal Service to proactively implement OSHA's proposed rule that would protect workers from the extreme heat. And the response was, you declined. And that's frustrating and confusing to me. So that's some of the questions I want to ask you about today. Being a congressman from Texas, my letter carriers talk about being able to fry an egg in their unair-conditioned vehicles on a hot day. Coming from labor before I was an elected official, part of my job, tragically, was to organize funerals and memorials for workers that work in the outdoors in places like Texas that when they get denied a water break or overstress in the heat can get hurt or die. the proposed OSHA rule, to be clear, would apply to most of the private industry and to the Postal Service, and it's pretty simple. It would just require that when the temperature gets above 90 degrees, workers are able to take a 15-minute break every couple hours and have water readily available to them.
Before Kesar continues, just pause for a second and think about the sheer absurdity of having to directly confront the head of a massive government organization during a congressional hearing about his own employees being forced to work in unsafe and potentially deadly conditions. You know, the fact that Kesar and his colleagues had to make such a demand at all is a major indictment, not only of DeJoy, but of our entire country's perception of the necessary workers who make up the backbone of our entire society. Now, more from Kesar.
We know how important this kind of protection would be for postal workers on any given day. We know that people like Eugene Gates, who was a longtime Postal Service employee, longtime letter carrier, tragically lost his life due to heat stroke, carrying mail in Texas in the 104-degree heat last year. Also the case for Wendy Johnson, a USPS worker in North Carolina who lost her life inside of a metal USPS truck in 95-degree heat just this last year. And that's just two of over 170,000 American workers who are injured and killed because of heat stress on any given year. You could have agreed to use the proposed Department of Labor rule that's gone under extensive review, but instead you declined any voluntary changes. Essentially, the letter said that OSHA would have to force the USPS to do this kind of protection for USPS workers. So I would like an explanation to it, but then my first question for you is also in your response. You said the Postal Service already has a heat prevention plan for workers and says in the letter, quote, that it is recognized as extremely successful. The current USPS plan has a mandatory annual heat illness training for workers, which is supposed to allow letter carriers to take breaks to cool down from the heat. But last year, the press investigated and reported that there were thousands of letter carriers across at least 10 states who didn't receive the training, but and they found fake records saying the Postal Service had provided that training.
We don't believe that the records were fake. They were batch loaded. Instead of individually loaded. So we think the press report was inaccurate. Was my briefing on that situation. With regard to the OSHA, it's something that's in process and being studied. We have our own program, which has been here for decades and has been reviewed and negotiated, and with the involvement of our unions and so forth. And it's recognized as a good program. If the OSHA plan comes out and gets approved, we'll evaluate aspects of that and maybe incorporate it into our plan. So certainly we have many carriers that go out in heat, in areas of heat, and we have these unfortunate issues, often where people have underlying health issues that have this unfortunate outcome that we have. But we feel getting new vehicles with air conditioning in them will be a big help. We're pushing to do that. But we'll study the plan. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of things, and a lot of things that have been around for a long time.
Understood, Mr.
A lot
DeJoy.
to change.
And I think amongst all of those things, we know that the lives and health and safety, including of your employees with underlying health conditions, which of course is so many Americans, should be of tantamount importance. And so whether or not this Politico investigation across multiple states showed falsified heat records or not, I hope that you'll reconsider this decision, because some places in Texas aren't going to get the new vehicles for years.
Yeah.
And that's if members on the other side of the aisle don't try to defund those vehicles. And so I hope you will take a look, with worsening summers, with 2 of your own employees having died here, that we take this really seriously and you reconsider, because I can tell you right now that if I was sitting on that side of the desk, I would raise my hand and swear an oath that I'd spoken with your own employees who've told me they've been reprimanded for going off route to get a drink of water, that they've gotten in trouble for trying to take a break. And whether or not that's your intention, I hope that you really look into it and do everything you can. I know that it's not your intention, to be clear. I know it's not your intention, but I hope that you do something about it. Honestly, it would really, really make a big difference.
DeJoy's reaction to Kesar's question was not only dismissive, but completely insufficient. His so-called justification for denying a worker protection order boils down to prioritizing profits over people, plain and simple.